Hello.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Today, we're going to talk about modernizing PR tactics when promoting indie games. So this session is held by Uber Strategist, and I'm sorry, filthy and free publishing, so I can't see tiny text. We're going to go over everything involving our experience with indie games, how we promoted them, some examples of what we've done for our indie game clients, and some tips and tricks about yes, some tips and tricks about how we're going to proceed with kind of certain, depending on the client, how we'll proceed with their games. Also, depending on what the games are like. My name's CJ, and I'm with Uber Strategist, Deputy Director of PR.
My name is Jessica Timms. I am the Director of PR here at Uber Strategist. I've been in games PR for about 5 years now. Got my start in games media and journalism. So that's me.
My name's Christopher Teuton. I also got I didn't get my start in games media journalism, but I have spent a lot of time in games media. I worked as the lead gaming editor for Screen Rant for a while, and I also make indie games. I've made point and click games, text adventures, RPGs, and like physical tabletop games, card games, that sort of thing.
And my name is Gareth Williams. Nice to meet you all. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Uber Strategist. I'm in my 20th year of being in the video games industry. I started in media in 2003. I moved into PR in 2008, and I've never stopped.
And hi, my name is Mario Kroll. I am the founder and president of Uber Strategist. I am in my 20th year of life. I know it's hard to believe, but no, just kidding. I've been doing PR for, around 25 plus years. Before starting Uber Strategist in 2014, I ran the US office for Calypso Media. So if you guys played Tropico 3, 4, or 5, then I had a little something to do with that. So.
All right.
I just always like hearing about Tropico games. That just always makes me happy. Whenever anybody brings it up, it's just like, oh, yes.
It's actually why I took the job at Calypso, because I was like, holy crap, I get to work on a Tropico title. And that was sort of the tiebreaker at the time. So it was pretty cool.
Actually, I think one of the first press items I got was from your team, Mario. It was a little voodoo doll, about that big, a little voodoo doll.
Okay. We had a full-blown El Presidente bobblehead too that I still have. So, which is some of the crazy stuff that we would do as PR, because Calypso would publish about 20 titles a year, and the budgets for marketing and PR were never that big. So we really had to be scrappy and do some cool things that didn't cost a lot of money, but left good impressions. And I think we've carried that over into.
Yeah, that definitely still applies today.
So let me just go back to the description for this roundtable. If any viewers have not yet seen it, so we're going to talk about indie games. So unlike AAA games that are a labor of love by dozens or maybe even hundreds of people, indie games are inherently more intimate experiences born out of a few or even one person's imagination. As such, finding an indie game's voice is tantamount to giving it the respect and promotion that it deserves. So we're going to talk about how we've achieved that on our multiple different projects over the years, and how we've gone about capturing the voice of an indie game. I think that's our primary thing, especially at Uber Strategist. We like to find the voice of what that game is, regardless if it's indie or AAA, but we want to sell it and promote it in a way that is how the developers really intend, with our, of course, our optimizations to make sure it gets picked up by press and influencers. So let's see here. We've gone through our intro. Now we're going to talk about some guiding questions. So for the team, everyone here, when we talk about modern PR, what does that mean for you, and what do you think it means for first-time developers?
Oh, I'd like to answer that one. So I think when it comes to really modernized PR tactics, even thinking back like 8 years when I was getting PR emails as a games journalist, it's like one of the things that really stands out always is one, a punchy subject line. And that still applies to us today, because it's like, if you don't get your email opened, what is the body matter, right? What does the meat and potatoes matter if nobody's even going to open your email? So that's, I guess, maybe one tip or trick is to steer clear from a very robotic, corporate sounding subject line in your emails when you're doing promotion that way. But when it comes to really like the modern PR experience, if you will, is one that combines a lot of different aspects between reaching press, getting promotion that way, but also keeping kind of that uniform voice across your social media channels, any of the other marketing that you're doing, things like that, where you really want that voice to be uniform across all of those different channels. And that's one of the things too, where I've seen indie developers get hung up on how they're talking to press versus how they're messaging their brand on social media, for example, where social media, maybe Twitter, seems more inherently casual. You're able to have more fun. And whereas press, you think, I'm talking to another professional. I got to keep this real buttoned up. And it's like, that's not always the case, you know? Games journalists are people too. And they want to, if you can make them smile, make their day with, you know, a funny PR email or just something that's truly creative and something they've never seen before, that goes such a long way.
Yeah, I have to agree on you on that. Like, I think so. A lot of people potentially in PR get caught up on promoting games in a certain way. And Mario and Gath, you probably could attest to this because I think this is more of an older style system where you reach out to press or influencers and you really try to just get the core information you're selling to them. And I think that has modernized in a bit, and especially with indie games where you're trying to just have a chat, tell them like, hey, this game's really cool because of this, this, and this. You like this show? You like this game? Yeah, maybe you'll like this. And like, it doesn't even have to be a long pitch anymore. When it comes to like cool indie games, just reach out to them and be like, this is great for these reasons. Super short, and I think that's worked really well for us. So I've been doing PR for indie publisher DreadXP for I think going on a year now, and that's usually the best way I've gotten success with their games. I'm personally invested a lot in horror games, so for me it's super easy just to know who to talk to and tell them and know what to say to them. But I just approach them and go like, hey, this game is going to have this kind of content in it. It's really cool because you can do this, this, and this. If you like this show, definitely check it out. Yeah, instead of just going the old way, I think it's much more beneficial now. Jess, you said that some people are people too. Some press are people too.
Yeah.
You know, not
Only
some.
some.
Some
only
of them
some
act
press.
like people too. Some of them are much more stiff.
Hopefully we're not
Much more
reaching the AI, you know, then it might be
Not
a
yet.
different story.
Yeah, we're not reaching the
Yeah.
AI bloggers yet.
I can definitely attest to from the editing and media side of things. It's just you get so many from not just PR companies, but from personal people or from like news alerts. You get so many emails a day,
Mhm.
and it becomes almost impossible to trudge through and look at every single one. So again, like what Jess said, the headline has to be really, really important, and it has to stand out. But also, it just is equally important as what CJ said, is it very much needs to be like personable and connected to the person that you're talking to. Like just in the same way that you need to like find the voice for your game, you need to be able to you need to know who to put that in front of who will actually be excited about it. And that can be like just as simple as, you know, following somebody that you like and press on social media and figuring out what their interests are, what their disinterests are, or it can be like, I know that this person has played, you know, 500 survival games on their Twitch account. They might be really excited about this new survival game that looks very interesting. And it's being able to make that a personal connection is always like very, very important. And also like, once you do that a couple of times and you're right, then you can say, hey, I know you like this. Maybe you should take a look at this. And I know that that tactic has worked on me as somebody in the media where it's just like, oh, this person knows I like that game and they sent me this. I trust their judgment. Let me give it a try.
They did their homework too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so I'll just chime in on that because I was going to talk to that a little bit. So I think the tactics and the mechanicals of the emails and getting them, that's one thing certainly. And you can, you know, we could spend probably multiple sessions talking about how to do that. I think especially if you're an indie, it is remembering that these are relationships. You know, it's better to have like 10 great connections with editors at outlets that matter to your genre, your type of game. And like relationships, like any other personal relationships, like you don't lead off with asking for something. Like it's always better when you can either give something first, or you can just establish some rapport and some general connection, because that is another way that people will cut through an email. Like early on in my career, I worked at a company, and my bosses said, listen, the old team that's there, they're kind of maybe a little jaded. They don't want to travel all over the country, and they just want to send things out, or they have their favorite outlets, and that's kind of who they deal with. So Mark, we would just like you to, for the next 3 months, just hit every freelancer, every editor you can in the country and in Canada. And I was like, absolutely. And I literally did that. And I had editors go like, why are you here? Like, no one ever comes and visits us, like in the hinterlands of, somewhere behind Toronto or something. They're like, nobody comes to us. Like, we're not important enough. I was like, you're important to me. I don't know you. Let's build these relationships. And there are people from 25 plus years ago that I still have relationships today that still remember me because I showed up as a little green, here, I can demo a game. How hard can this be? And so building those relationships, and that speaks to another aspect, is time. Like, don't make PR and promoting, and I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about this a little bit more, don't make it an afterthought. Like, a lot of indies, and I get it, you're competing for resources. You can either make the game or you can market the game. But the reality is, if you're a small team, you need to kind of be able to do both. And just like you can't do a game overnight, you also are not going to build your social media channels, your community, and also not your press relationships. So when you're starting out, build those, find those 10 or 20 influential editors that you respect, that you like their work, that like what your game is about, and just have a human conversation with them, a short email pitch, and say, hey, I don't know if this is your thing, but we're new, be humble. And that's one nice thing too about not being a PR professional and being a developer or even a publisher, especially when you're first starting out. Editors will cut you a little bit more slack. Like, you don't have to be completely polished and know all the rules and all the ways to approach them. You get that. And the other important thing that we talked about that somebody just mentioned was be honest. Like, if you sell everything, like everything is, the best things in sliced bread, when we know not everything is equally good, just be honest. I used to pitch games and I'd say, hey, this isn't the greatest thing ever, but here's a couple nuggets about this game that really stand out or that are innovative. Here's some other things that we couldn't really do because we're a small team, whatever. Editors are human. They will give you the benefit of the doubt, and they might not notice some of those things on their own, but if you guide them as to what's really cool and stand out about the game, that's going to get you the most mileage, because that's what's going to get you positive highlights. Gareth, if you have anything to add on that.
Very briefly, because I know that we spend a lot we're PR people, we can talk for a lot. But it's also interesting to understand that all of the best publications, you're competing with an awful lot of stuff, as Christopher's already said. Don't underestimate the value of anything outside of tier 1, because they can be your biggest advocates. You could have a publication that may only get 50,000 unique monthly visitors per month, but they might write about your game 6 times in a month. And that's going to have an impact on Google for SEO. It's going to have an impact on store traffic to an extent. So don't ever undervalue any relationship. Don't necessarily focus just on those tier 1s, the GameSpots, Game Informers, etc. There's always other people that are more than willing to talk about what you're promoting.
Before we move on to one of the next guiding topics, I do want to address 2 of the questions in our chat. The first one being from Sharky Shark. What are some good examples of a headline and any advice you have on making them? So referencing what I said earlier about trying to just relate a game to something someone might have experience with already. One client we worked with, Neon Doctrine. So they have a game called Yuppie Psycho, and it released a few years ago. So our challenge was to try to get more attention for this indie game that was a few years old. With the massive success, and I'm personally a fan of the show Severance, I said, all right, so I'm going to reach out to people and call this like Severance meets Corpse Party, because the game kind of embodies like the aesthetic of both things. So that was a super easy, simple headline, but it was very effective, just saying like Severance meets Corpse Party in Yuppie Psycho, corporate horror game, Yuppie Psycho Executive Edition. And then we invite people to request keys and play it. Captured Rapture, yes, that game is so good. I was personally very excited to work on that once we got with them. On my screen, I believe we're going to show that in a second. Yes, so for another one we did, so I'm gonna talk about the headline and then also the intent of capturing the voice of this game. So for Dread XP, they released the Mortuary Assistant in August, and for this outreach, so this wasn't initially planned. I just saw an opportunity to really do something silly with this. For this outreach, the headline was Memorial Service, join on August 2nd to celebrate the demise of all that is holy. This is a game about a possession and demons, and you have to try to exorcise them. So that's the headline for this, and it was very left field and weird. I'm sure a lot of press weren't really sure why they were getting a memorial service email, but it was an extra, so I figured if people didn't open it because it didn't seem relevant, those who did would be like really impressed, and I got some good feedback on it. As you can see, this one I tried to have as much fun as I could given the content of the game, so I themed this media alert, which is the intent was to get review requests. I themed it after a memorial service invite. So this banner actually came from the Dread XP website that they made for the game. We found out after the fact that it went up that this existed, so I was like, all right, let's do something with this. We just jump on this as fast as possible. So it invites people to attend the memorial service for the mortuary assistant. I looked up templates to make it look as legit as possible. The game is the one with little fig leaves show that they died, quote unquote. The release date, and then it links to their viral website. And then I just try to use as much language as possible so it can be really silly and fun. And then I included some Latin just to sign off on that. I believe that translates to death. There isn't death. Life only changes. Something like that. Yeah, so that was one example. Anyone else?
Something to add to this too, and you mentioned it earlier, was as far as when you're working on a specific kind of game, for example, horror genre. When it comes to, I guess our overarching theme here is like finding the voice, right? Is, when you're working on a game like that like inherently has so much personality, the worst thing that you could do is not capture that in your communications about your game, whether that's PR, marketing, social media, whatever it is. I mean, just, kind of imagine how disjointed it would be to have a game like that, the Mortuary Assistant, that's like so fun. It's kind of silly. It's legitimately scary, though I've played it. And you're talking about it in the most corporate sounding, robotic way. It's so disjointed at that point that it's hard to almost get it back on track once you message it that way, because people are going to look at that and say, well, this game looks cool. Maybe you've got some really cool key art or screenshots, but it's like, man, it sounds boring. And it's hard to get the cat kind of back in the bag once you communicate it that way, when really the opportunity was there to lean into whether it's silly, whether it's really scary. If your game's so scary that it's going to make people pee their pants, maybe you say that, because, that's one way to get attention to it.
Yeah, you want to embody the narrative of the game, the narrative and the themes of the game. I think that's
a
very good way of getting indie games noticed.
I think
You go first, Christopher. Go on.
Okay, one other thing I did want to say to CJ's point about Yuppie Psycho is that it's very much also a case of you have to convince this outlet that this game is worth covering. Not just that it's worth covering in this looks like a fun game sense, but everything online is driven by algorithms, clicks, ads, all that sorts of thing. And when you tell somebody it's, Severance, which is a very popular TV show, meets something else which is very popular, it's already giving them an in to give it to their audience, and that is a very, very important thing to do. And it's doing it in a way that is unique unto that very specific game, and it's not just this is Stardew Valley but X.
Yeah,
go ahead, Gareth.
Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Jeff. You got something to
I was going to say, well, don't forget your point. But what I was going to say was, when it comes to using that, like, this game meets this game, when you're using that type of communication, remember, too, that there's kind of a time and place for that. If you're using that with every single one of your communications just to get clicks or whatever, it can come off as kind of cheap, right? When you're first getting started and you want to get some eyes on your game, that's a little more welcome, right? When you're talking about, like, you like this, or maybe it's something very specific to the person that you're talking to. That they like this thing, or they've played this, a competing title, and it's relevant to your game somehow. Absolutely lean into that. But like I said, try not to have that be your entire marketing campaign or your entire PR campaign. That can, come off as kind of cheap. And like I said, there's kind of a time and place to use that type of communication too, because you do want your product to also stand on its own.
I was going to add a couple quick things. So one, I'm going to do a quick plug for this book that I've made my whole team read. So Smart Brevity, it's basically all about keeping it short, because you have a really long email headline, especially a lot of people are looking at emails on mobile. It's going to fill up the whole screen. So be short and be to the point, and then have fun with it. And this is not exactly an email, this is not a press release or pitch that I wrote, but following up with CES. At CES, I saw this one technology, and it was for VR games, and it simulated artificial smells. So they have like multiple cartridges of smell in there, and they could combine, and you could make your own smells. So then when you're like in a green meadow in a game, in theory, or actually in practice as well, you could smell like the trees and fields around you and things, as kind of deepening the VR experience. And I thought it was pretty cool. So when I followed up, my email headline to them was, I really liked what I smelled at CES, ... And I got a pretty quick response coming back from. So you just think about again, it's communication. It's just like if you're sending an email or something else, your main objective, again, to the earlier point we made, is no one opens that email. It doesn't matter. You have the perfect pitch or press release crafted in the body. No one's ever going to see it. So you've got to get past that hurdle to get them to open the email. I'm not saying be clickbaity, but you might want to you want to stand out in some way that is not kitschy, that is genuine, and also, gives them an idea of what to expect when they open your email.
It shows that you have your own passion for what you're trying to promote.
Exactly.
We have another question. This is from Discord. As an introvert working in an extrovert-dominated industry, do you have any recommendations for developing networking skills and presenting ideas confidently? So I'm in this camp already, if you haven't noticed. So when I first started in PR, it was very nerve-wracking having to network in person, be at trade shows in person. Over time, I think that's a skill that just naturally develops. I've gotten better about talking about games with people, meeting strangers, and promoting games. And I think a good practice for that is really just getting to know people through social media. Utilize that as a resource to become more comfortable. So that when it comes to in-person discussions, or if you meet that person like at a trade show, there's already some rapport there. And you don't even have to actually have met them for that relationship to further develop and for you to feel more comfortable interacting with them. I think it's just I would say, because a lot of our work is either remote or through email for the majority of the year when it's not trade shows, that's a really good way to just start getting to know people. And then when it comes to in-person events, you're just much more comfortable.
And I think
that does-
personally, too,
Sorry.
like as somebody who also is somewhat introverted and it has to talk to people pretty much all day, every day, like it's something that I think everybody deals with to a certain extent, and you always have to keep that in mind. Like I still get nervous before every single call I have, even though there's rarely a day in the week where I don't have a call scheduled at some point. But I still, like 20 minutes before, 5 minutes before, it's just like, okay, do I know what I'm going to say? Is everything going to be okay? Is that fine? Is that check? Are the dogs going to bark? Like there's a million things always going through my head. And I think most people, or at least more people than like outwardly admit it, also feel that way. And so remembering that makes it easier to do it. I'm also fiddling with a Rubik's Cube on the other hand.
You've got to have something to fiddle with. I always do. But I would also add that in my experience across the last 20 years, the majority of journalists are introverted rather than extroverted. There are a few that are extrovert, but the majority are introverted. And it's interesting seeing the people that move from journalism to PR and the drastic change that can bring when it comes to things like events. But as an example of CJ, when I first met CJ, and I think I've met CJ once in 18 months because we're all remote on the other side of the world. CJ, I found that CJ was a little bit introverted. And normally what I would do is I would go, okay, I'm going to get him out of his skin. But somebody had already said to me, CJ can take a while to warm to you if he hasn't met you yet. So I gave it that time, and by the end of that week, it was great. And I can have a straight conversation without any problems with CJ. And I think if you understand who you're talking to, this is not just a games media thing, but if you understand who you're talking to or who you want to build that relationship with and how they might interact on social media, that'll give you an idea of potentially how they're going to do that in real life.
Just to bring that back to our next topic question, so it's actually pretty relevant, and also to the last question that was asked. VCD Gamer says, "I'm the kind of person that has little social presence and is more of an introvert, but I have a fascinating game idea that I want to present. Got any tips how to get rid of cold feet when it comes to PR?" Honestly, I wouldn't even worry about it too much. If you have a project that you are confident in, when it comes to contacting PR, which you definitely want to do. If well before the game is actually released, just send an email. A lot of companies such as ourselves will have a call with you beforehand and talk about like what is it that you need, what do you want to achieve with this, and we'll actually go over it with you and just talk about it. It's there is very little reason for there to be like a fear or like hesitation when it comes to reaching out to a PR agency, and I just speak for ourselves really, that we're very approachable. If you want us to tell you what we think about how you're approaching this game launch or what we think of your game, that's perfectly fine. Just you could just ask us, and we'll just give you honest feedback, and we won't go to position where we're like, why is this person bothering us? This game is horrible. Like, no, we'll give you the time of day, and I think that's something that's very important for a lot of agencies to do, especially when it comes to indies who don't have necessarily that kind of networking or PR experience, that they're not really sure how to go about it.
Yeah, to add on to that too, as far as like a social presence, it's not necessary, I would say, but when we're talking about like modern PR, traditional PR, social media, influencers, marketing, like it all kind of ties together into a larger piece. And sometimes it really can make an impact to be interacting with other indie developers, media, like on Twitter, for example, which is, mainly a networking platform. And being able to talk about your game there, like I said, interact with other indie devs that are going to help support you because you're supporting them, amplifying their projects and so forth. That goes a long way, just getting your name out there within the space, within the community, and also helping to build those relationships. Again, to Mario's point, it's really so much more about the relationships than it is just overthinking how you're talking to people.
Yeah, finding a community is very, very important. Like even if you don't have a Twitter account, you don't use Facebook, even if you just want to go to like Reddit and an indie game dev subreddit there, just to show it to somebody and say, hey, everybody, I'm working on this. And once you do that the very first time, it'll make it easier to show it to the next person next time.
And I was going to say IGDA, make sure you join that. There's lots of places. Unreal Developer Club. I'm sure Unity has some things as well. Local meetups. Go to trade shows, even the small ones in your area, and just talk to people about your game. If they bring it up, it really is a practice and comfort thing. It's once you take that rejection out, and not everybody's going to respond. If we were fragile, wallflowers about rejection, we'd be in the wrong field, because we send out hundreds to thousands of emails, and a lot of them get ignored. And so we have to be persistent, and we don't take it personally. It's just, hey, we got the wrong person, or the wrong person on the wrong day. And so that's why I'm saying it's quality over quantity matters for starters, and just practicing. It can be your friends, your peers. Slowly weave in. You can refine your pitch. You can read people and see how they're reacting to how you're describing it. But also, to CJ's point, the difference between modern PR and older PR, both Gareth and I have, what we used to call, dialing for donuts, so to speak, where we would have to pitch editors on the phone. Nowadays, I don't even know if editors answer phones half the time anymore. We certainly don't spend a lot of time.
Everybody's introverted, so hopefully not.
Yeah, so it's like, it's not.
If we all get our way, no one has to answer a phone ever again. If we all try really hard.
Humans. But the point being is, a lot of this stuff being interviews, being pitches, being emails to present, being press release, it's all written. So if you're an introvert and it makes you nervous to be in front of somebody in real time, That's something you can kind of counter by a lot of this work being done offline and in writing, and you can revise what you were going to say a couple more times. And there's not that pressure of going, oh crap, I wish I hadn't said that live and now it's been recorded, that you have at maybe trade shows and things like that. So it's a good segue, but also don't shy away from trade shows, because you do need that. Once the press pays attention, the next step then is to market and showcase the game at trade shows and events and other opportunities. And you want to have a little bit of practice. It does get a lot easier, guaranteed, the more times you try. Just don't take it personally if you don't get the reaction that you want.
Okay. Continuing on that track of communicating with PR, Flat Voxel asks, what point of the project do you recommend starting with PR? I suppose the more you have to show, the better, but usually that comes very late in the project. Yes, that is a big mistake a lot of indies do make, where they're so heads down, focused on getting the game made, just really just all development focused. And then when it comes down to it, they're like maybe a week or two away from launch, and they go, wait a minute, how am I going to promote this? I have a budget, but I haven't thought about who to help me get this news and like reviews set up and get all that information out there. At a minimum, I would say, depending on the scale of the project, like you want to have like at least a 3-month lead time, just so that you can properly announce the game, share more details about the game, uh, pitch when keys are available, and then actually push through toward the launch, announce that it's out, and then continue pushing for review keys, so you can get that hands-on coverage, you get that news coverage, and you have enough time to at least maybe do like an interview with a couple of outlets. But again, that's like very minimum amount of time. You don't want to wait to the last minute, and you definitely don't want to go, hey, I released my game last week, or actually we've seen some instances where like, hey, I released my game a month ago and it's not doing so well. What can you do to help me? That is very difficult. We have had good results in the past and some instances, but the earlier the better. Even if your project is a year away, it doesn't hurt to just talk to a PR team to get some advice. Just be on their contact list for the future, so you know that, okay, these guys told me this and that. I know I should reach out to them when I'm more prepared, because you just need to be prepared. I've seen a lot of indie games on Steam that I'm like, that looks really cool. Why does it only have 2 reviews? That's a shame. I wish everyone could get their game noticed. And back on something, some resources Mario mentioned. If you don't have a budget for PR, we do have a blog post at uberstrategist.com that talks about some things you can do on your own. So check that out. One being submit draft announcements, submit that to gamespress.com at a minimum. And then jumping to Cube Hamster's question, what is the place to be right now when it comes to marketing games? So of course PR, influencer activations if you can, but Twitter, Reddit, TikTok, those are all great places to kind of do snippets, share snippets of your games. I've seen with DreadXP, I noticed that a lot of attention was put toward the horror game genre, and like you'd see clips of the Mortuary Assistant, you see clips of Dread Delusion, Sucker for Love. Like, if the indie game has that potential to really capture your attention in a 10-second clip or just with some really good screenshots, you need to utilize those platforms. And just don't be too salesy about it. Just show people what's going on with the game. Let them know that it's in development. This is how it looks, and people can follow you so they can stay informed about the progress.
Yeah, something to add to that too is the answer to this question, it's a good question, is a little bit different for every team, I think, depending on the size of the team and your bandwidth. So for example, that answer might be different for a team of 10 versus a one-man operation, but one piece of advice I think that is important is don't spread yourself too thin. One, that's a lot to keep up on when you probably have your actual game to work on. And 2, if you're all over the place, it's really difficult to really establish a good strategy on social media. It's probably a whole other, conversation to have about that. But when it comes to that, keep it focused, keep your efforts focused, and kind of go all in maybe on 2 or 3 channels versus every single one you can get your hands on. And when you are talking to press, if you get some coverage for your game, reviews, things like that, always be sure to share that on your social channels as well.
So I'm gonna very briefly jump in and add something else. There's a friend of mine a really nice Italian gentleman who has a phrase that I really like, which is you have to prepare the market. Whether you are selling your first indie game or your third indie game or your 10th, you'll still have to do this. To Jess's point, I think I'm not sure who said it recently. I think I know who it is, but somebody said recently to me, doing something is better than doing nothing. So where Jess says, pick the channels that you think you can dedicate the time for, whether that is PR, influencers, specific social media channels, and find where you're comfortable and do something to prepare the market rather than at the last minute go, oh my God, game's out next week. How do I fix this? Just give yourself the time to prepare the market.
So I'd also love to get Chris's input on this if possible, because you kind of have that insight as media and also on the publisher side as far as, one, how do you like to handle campaigns as a publisher? And second part of that question is, as media, do you find it a lot more impactful when you are getting an ongoing campaign, you're getting, consistent emails for a game versus hearing about it for the first time and it's launched and you're like, oh, first time hearing about it,
Well, it very much is. Not very few games are Hi-Fi Rush, right? You can very few things can just be shadow dropped onto everybody and then get 100% rave reviews across the board and have everyone in the world be very excited about it. People do, when we talk about like building a relationship to your audience and getting information out about your game, that's kind of like both of those are two sides of the same coin, and it is very much about like even if it's just a little bit where it's just like, oh, hey, I'm working on this game and it's probably going to be called this. And then you're like, okay, I've been working on this for a couple of months. Here's a screenshot of my progress so far. And even if you're just doing that, you're showing people, one, that something is coming, but also that progress is being made on it. And so that's like really, really important. For my own games, a lot of times I would get on those Twitter, what do you call it? Just like the hashtags that happen every day, where it's like pixel dailies or something like that,
Screenshot
or
Saturday,
screenshot Saturday, low poly horror, like any types of that thing that is relevant to the game that you're making. And because there are a ton of people who follow that stuff, and they will remember once they start to see it like that Saturday, they'll remember it the next Saturday. They're like, oh, look at that. That's that same thing again. There are so many indie games that have not come out yet that I only know about because of those types of threads that I'm really excited for. And so that's really cool to see. And from the media side of things, when we go back to talking about how many emails you have, it just helps to coming from a PR company and getting those updates on, oh, hey, this game is coming next year. Oh, hey, the preview's ready if you want to look at it. Oh, hey, here's a review code. Oh, hey, DLC is here. That's keeping it relevant and keeping it interesting. And again, like the more times you do see it, the more of a relationship you'll build with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of works all across the board, no matter what.
I was going to say, related to that too, I think also, and this is a time factor, so another reason to start earlier is see where your investments are paying off, right? So if you're on Twitter and you're putting a lot of time into Twitter and it's just not resonating and you're not seeing growth, it's totally okay to abandon that. Like, you don't have to be on all of the channels. Be also where you're connecting with your audience, because sometimes your audience will surprise you and not be in the places that you think they're most reachable. So I think that's definitely something important, to compare and say, is the effort you're putting in worth it, and is it in the right place, or could you double down on one or two other channels where you're actually seeing traction?
And if you're an indie dev, to continue on social media, follow the people that you would love to cover your game. Not necessarily jump into their mentions and start bothering them, but just follow them so you know what kind of things they're interested in. And then just start like that conversation, and then you'll know in the future whether you partner with a PR agency or if you're handling everything by yourself. You have a list of contacts building up that you could potentially send keys to or send news to, or just reach out to via email. At a bare minimum, like we said, something's better than nothing. But partnering with the PR agency, so that actually takes us to one of our next topics, and also one of the questions. If you're not sending keys or reviews or anything like that, like major call to actions, like, all right, here's the game. what can you do between that? I would say, so of course you announce the game properly. You do the key dates, release day announcement. You talk about when it's coming out. But for us, I think it goes back to capturing the voice of a game where in between those asset drops or core newsy news things, you really want to just sell like the themes of the game. I think that's why we prefer longer campaigns, just so
Mhm.
it's not just those news bits. It's more like here's how this game works, here's what this game's going to do, here's what's going to feature. Just really just talk about the elements of the game, and I think that's also where you can have a lot of fun. If an indie dev doesn't really know how to fill those gaps themselves, maybe they can't produce a trailer, or maybe they can. You can kind of base it off of what's available and what's within reason. We've had clients that couldn't necessarily produce a trailer in between major campaign beats, PR beats. So we just have fun with it and just do silly stuff like the one I showed earlier, the mortuary assistant, or just throw some things together and just have fun with it.
Mhm.
And you can also start requesting keys, like putting a request key function in your outreach from the very beginning. But I would say like you want to make sure that you just get those themes across primarily.
Yeah. I mean,
I think
animated GIFs, I think we've done pretty well with, and that's pretty easy to create. One of the other things really, and we talked about this in the last question a little bit too, is really thinking about what we do as an agency, for example. We will, talk with the client very early on about the strategy, because it's very important that you're looking at what are the milestones, because let's say you have a major new feature that you're including there. You need to think about that a little bit. When is that actually going to be available? When can you showcase it? Because it's always better to talk about it and show it. If delaying a particular outreach a couple weeks because a feature is ready and it's a really really cool feature that will get some attention, it's better to shuffle that around. So when you're try to not be so cookie cutter and, hey, here's my announcement, here's my preview, here's my review, games shipped. Come up with beats in between. If it's a strategy game, maybe you introduce the factions, or the world or the lore or the backstory. There's always something you can work with. You can use your previous concept art, or maybe you can do concept art compared to what it looks like in the game now and things like that. There's a lot of cool things like that that don't require you to produce some additional things. And I'll talk about this press release and partnership announcements or high profile hires. I'll say, first of all, the high profile hires, it's always a mixed bag. First of all, I would manage your expectations that it won't be perceived quite as cool as important by the media in general than you probably think that hire was. So that's one thing we've learned the hard way. Doesn't mean you can't get attention, but a lot of time, in my opinion, those particular types of announcements are best handled as a pitch. When you're talking, to the venture beats of the world, GameIndustry.biz, MCV, those kinds of things, and put it in context. Like, not only that this person's joined your company and has done some cool stuff in the past, but how are they going to transform your organization? What are they bringing to the table? What does this partnership mean? And there's always a fine line. And one of our other friendly PR agencies had a survey, I think, on Twitter that was like, when you pitch to editors, do you kind of tell them the stories that they could write? Do you just kind of leave the asset and the pitch out there and let them figure it out? I like sort of that middle road where you intimate what stories are possible, so the folks that appreciate that can go, oh, that's a cool idea, I'll riff off of that. And the ones that don't want to be told what to write about, they're okay too, because they can still run with that story. Of course, you do from a tactical perspective. You want to have like a short bio of the people. You want to have some pictures and some images. Always make sure you have great quality logos in different assortments. I think we have blog posts on what to put in a press kit. If not, there's a lot of good resource material out there. But you always want to make sure you have, a press kit for you as your studio or developer. But then also we tend to do a separate sub press kit, if you will, for specific beats or pitches that provide new refreshed assets that are relevant to what you're pitching out there. So don't just assemble your press kit day one when you start your PR campaign, then don't touch it for another 6 months. Like, you need to keep updating, and you also need to make it easy to see what's new versus what are old assets, because that's also something that will make life a lot easier for the press. And honestly, the easier to make their life, the more willing they're going to be working with you and picking you out, even if maybe they're not convinced that you're going to give them millions of eyeballs. If you have a cool enough story, you're easy to work with, you're nice, you've built credibility with them, that buys you a lot of traction.
Jessica and Chris, you both have a question directed at you.
That's an interesting question. Chris, I'd like maybe your insight on how people should approach that, because I have my own thoughts. As media, does writer and editor make a huge difference?
I think that for the most part, if it's somebody who has in the past or presently says that they're open to receiving pitches and ideas and stuff like that, then that's absolutely fine. But other than that, I think that the first thing you should do is go through the official channels, because it's very possible that that person does not like it. Not every writer wants to be contacted publicly. You know, some people would just rather stay in the background and do the jobs that are assigned to them. And you have to always make sure that you're respecting the wishes of the person that you're talking to. That being said, most people, especially if they're at like the editor level, are always interested to hear exciting things. And, you know, do it through the official channels, and don't bother people that have clearly like don't want that. Is the most important thing, I think. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts also.
Yeah, no, I mean, like doing research is, I think, the biggest part of it. Depending, it's funny. There's not a really super clear answer to that question, because every outlet tends to be different. Like higher tier publications tend to have a bit more structured org chart, but smaller publications, it's kind of, you maybe have 3 people kind of doing everything, or, you know, between 3 and 10 people. And then it's like, well, sometimes the editor is the assigning editor, and you do talk to them with PR outreach and so forth, or, you know, they're the editor in chief and a writer, and so they are the person to talk to. So it kind of differs. But to Chris's point, try to find out through some research. Sometimes it's just easy as checking their Twitter, seeing exactly what their role is. A lot of people have like a pinned tweet that says, reach me at this email address for pitches, or I'm not accepting pitches at this time, things like that. But also something that I wanted to add to this is, when we're talking about modern PR and just the state of the industry at the moment, is that if you're keeping your ear to the ground at all, there's lots of layoffs happening consistently. And so it's so important to be updating your press lists all the time. What you're going to see more so now is that a lot of freelance writers are contributors to sites. They may not have a site domain email address. You might need to go try to do a little bit of research, maybe DM them on Twitter if it indicates that you can do that and that they're welcoming DMs from PR. And ask them what the best way to reach them is. Maybe you're trying to reach them for a specific site, and they've got bylines on multiple sites, and you might be able to get coverage on an even bigger site or something that's more relevant than what you might have them initially on your list for, or something like that.
And if you're pitching a freelancer and you want your news item to go to a specific site that they write for, don't CC that like an editor at that site, because that's why you're basically going to strong arm them, like, hey, I want this on this site, can you handle it? Just when it comes to freelancers, approach them with the idea and say, hey, can you get this to any of the publications you write for? Do you think any of them will buy it? Like, do they want it? Yeah, freelancers are definitely a really good resource. So pay attention to where they work and contribute to.
And also just look at the type of stuff that they've done in the past. If it's somebody who very much seems like they really like finding new indie games and telling them about people, that's going to get you a lot better than somebody who just, enjoys writing about whatever AAA game released that day.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There are plenty of writers that just cover indies, even at the higher tier outlets, and they might be a better fit than trying to reach somebody that wrote about just a competing title, because maybe say you have a game similar to Frostpunk. Well, even though they cover Frostpunk and you've got a similar like survival city builder, they're probably not going to be super interested. It might be better to reach the person that is covering indie games. So again, research who you're talking to.
I think there's a really, I can make a specific point here. So I'm based in the UK, for those that hadn't guessed by my weird accent. But I can talk about European press till the cows come home. If you want your indie game covered on Eurogamer, for example, yes, you could pitch the editor. They will listen. But the best person for you to pitch is Christian Donlan, because every week they do a feature which is what we're playing. And every week, without fail, it's always indie games. And the reason for that is they don't have a space to push indie games on their publication, because they're competing on SEO for 15 different games at one point every week. So they have to find ways to get indie games noticed, and that's the way to do it on Eurogamer, for example. And the reason that's relevant for the US is that their largest audience segment is North America. It isn't the UK or Europe. It's 60% North America. So you're going to reach that audience by reaching out to them directly. And if you want to, Christian Donlan's the right person. He's also possibly the greatest writer I've ever met. But it's things like that little bit of research where you look into each publication and go, how do they cover it? Not just who's the right person, but how do they cover it? Do they have, if you don't see indie games on specific publications, yeah, you can try. But if you're trying and you can't see any coverage to that point of indie games, other people probably have and haven't succeeded. So be realistic about what you want to achieve as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as part of the value of partnering with an agency, this is going to lead into Kevin Nicholson's question. Who they have a marketing campaign in mind that's not quite normal. Like
CJ, can we also tackle Cube Hamsters?
Yeah.
Marketing.
Yeah. So let me. Okay. So tackling a marketing campaign for not a quite normal game. How receptive are PR firms to carrying out client-based ideas? I would say, at least in our company, we're very receptive to listening to what a client, especially indie devs, want to say about their game. If they have a really cool theme or idea, yeah, we'd listen to it and just see, does it make sense? How can we work with you to optimize that idea so that it is palatable to a certain press or influencers? But yeah, I would say we're super receptive to, like, if you have a great idea and like if our ideas aren't entirely matching, or you want to supplement our ideas that we present to you at the beginning of a campaign, even better. Like, we love prepared clients. If you're prepared with
your game
something,
best.
yeah, your game best. So we'll optimize things, get it out there, and we'll both be happy with the messaging. And that's a very important part of our relationships with indie devs, that they have to be happy with what we're saying about the game. We're not going to fabricate anything like that. We want to make sure that the game is being sold and told to people as authentically as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was going to say, our job is to, if we don't think something is going to work, one, a lot of times we won't know until we try it. It is still more, magic rather than science. But if we advise you and say, hey, we don't think that's going to be the best approach, it is our responsibility, we feel, that we come up with some alternatives. And the other thing is, the longer we work with clients, and we're very blessed, we work with a lot of our clients ultimately over many years, even if we started on just a small project. And the longer we work with those clients, the more we get to know each other and our cadence and what we like, what we don't like. And it just becomes a better, really a true partnership and a collaboration. And so I think that's also something important, where over time, most agencies will get even better at pitching your games in the style that really combines the best of both worlds, which is your vision with, best practices on the PR side.
Mario, do you want to handle that other question you referenced?
Yeah, so it's actually not a weird question at all, but Cube Hamsters, weird question. What are your thoughts on using marketing to get into the spotlight with publishers, investors, especially if you're a new developer without a proven track record? So the last part is probably the most challenging. If you're brand new, never done this before, that becomes a different conversation. But we're not talking about right now getting investors to write you a check tomorrow. We're talking about getting in the spotlight. So I'm a huge advocate of that. And we've done it quite a few times with a number of clients. In fact, we're doing it right now with a newly formed studio. The team members are pretty established at other companies. So sometimes it also becomes a matter of finding what have they done previously. Obviously, you're starting for the very first time, but it is actually a great idea to get some positive press. Again, you don't need a lot. It's a good tier 2 or tier 3 press that likes your game. For example, we worked with a game a couple years ago, CJ and I did, and it was a multiplayer title in early alpha. And the client just hired us to get them a couple pieces of coverage, actually, not only for our publisher conversation, but for talking with Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo for some of the particular opportunities that they had there. And it worked really, really well. We had another client that we worked for that we got announced, and they were picked up by Devolver as a publisher within about 3 months after that. So it definitely works. And so I do think that is a really good strategy, even if you're not planning to take the game fully and publish it yourself and so forth. Get that out there, get some third-party validation that your game is cool, and then you can show that, and then you don't have to keep pitching your game with your own words. You can actually use the outlets, articles, and say, hey, this is what PC Gamer or IGN or whoever said about my game. It just makes the conversation a little bit easier.
All right. Y'all did fantastic. I would like to give a shout out to someone who is not a sponsor, but Logitech Keyboards, for the fact that I just dumped an entire pint of coffee into mine right as this started, and it's still working for some reason. So,
Yay, Logitech.
Today's heroes.
I did order.
I have mine here, so I can agree. They're pretty robust.
I literally took it outside and dumped it, and coffee came out of it, and then plugged it back in. So yeah. Thank you all so much. We've got the next one queued up, and everybody keep in mind, if you have questions that didn't get answered, the team from Uber Strategist, to the best of my knowledge, all of them are on our Discord, discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. You can go there into the post-session chat, ask questions. Everybody's going to answer. Everyone will be happy and love you for it. And so with that, we're going to step out. Give me like 2 minutes to get Dan stepped up, and then we'll have the next one on the way.
Thanks for having
everybody.
us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.